Good afternoon, I'm Vashon Brown with the Midday News. A special welcome if you're watching on onespotmedia.com. Parliament's Public Administration and Appropriations Committee says the St. Ann Municipal Corporation will have to face the committee to explain the use of $46 million which was provided to the corporation by the Tourism Enhancement Fund. There were heated discussions last week in the corporation meeting over the use of funds in what should be a cleanup program due to COVID-19. Chairman of the committee, Dr. Wickham McNeil, says that matter needs to be addressed urgently as it is now playing out in public.
Would arise. Why would you give St. Ann's Bay and not, for example, Montego Bay, Negril, Port Antonio, and Kingston? Or is it a part of a broader program? If so, why is it that when we wrote to the Ministry of Tourism, we were not informed of any other expenditure other than St. Ann's Bay and a proposed expenditure for Falmouth, but no other expenditures?
In that regard, he says the local government ministry should be brought before the PAAC and the St. Ann Municipal Corporation be invited to answer the requisite questions.
And where we see things that raise a red flag, we have to, as a committee, look at it and nip these things in the bud if there is something to nip. But certainly we have to provide oversight to ensure transparency. Now, the issue that, as I said before, there is what appears to be a one-off payment to the St. Anne's Municipal Council. We have not been advised of any other municipal council being so blessed. And quite frankly, one has to look into it and see whether it is part of a broader policy initiative or how this decision was arrived at.
In the meantime, committee member Fitz Jackson says there are other questions which should be answered by the municipal corporation. One of those questions, Mr. Jackson argues, is in relation to a charging port being installed for hybrid vehicles by the municipal corporation.
Since you are going to be having the St. Ann Parish Council at the next sitting for the reasons you just outlined, I would also want them, when they come, to provide reasons why the council has invested over $100,000 to put in a charging port for hybrid motor vehicles, which from the information I have will increase the monthly electricity bill from $30,000 to $100,000 per month.
The parliamentary opposition has renewed its call for the government to make clear its protocols for how Jamaicans seeking to be repatriated will be dealt with. The call comes on the heels of the arrival of more than 1,000 Jamaicans aboard a Royal Caribbean cruise ship yesterday. Anthony Lugg reports.
Those Jamaicans on board and their family here in Jamaica can now have some peace that they are finally back at their home.
Opposition spokesman on tourism Dr. Wickham McNeil, moments after the Royal Caribbean Adventures of the Seas cruise ship pulled into the Falmouth Pier on Tuesday. Dr. McNeil, along with opposition spokesman on national security Fitz Jackson and Member of Parliament for Trelawney Northern Victor Wright, visited the area to witness the arrival of the ship. For Mr. Jackson, the matter should not have come to this. However, he hopes there's no recurrence.
And the Jamaican government, any Jamaican government, or whichever administration, has responsibility for all its people all the time. These 1,044 Jamaicans are not any different from another 1,044 Jamaicans in St. Thomas, St. Mary, St. Catherine, or anywhere else in Jamaica that find themselves in a situation for which the government have a responsibility to respond to.
The long-awaited arrival of the ship has come, but for those aboard, the wait continues. Those disembarking will be tested in the sterile area being set up around the port starting Thursday. However, all will not disembark at the same time. Instead, they will come off the ship in batches of 200 every 48 to 72 hours, which means the process of getting all on land could take up to 2 weeks.
Can you imagine the Jamaicans, 1,044 of them, on the ship looking back now to land at Jamaica, what they're feeling finally to be home. And I think it's important for the government to recognize something. They're not doing anybody a favor. It is their duty, their responsibility to look out for Jamaicans, both here and overseas, abroad. Because if your government don't look out for you, who is going to look out for you?
It's the reason why opposition spokesman on national security Fitz Jackson wants the government to make its position and protocols clear.
I call on the government, the Prime Minister, to act responsibly, put aside pettiness, and put the interests of the Jamaican people and our future front and center of everything which is contemplated within that cabinet and the government which he leads.
Anthony Lugg, TVJ News.
And the first batch of Jamaicans will leave the Royal Caribbean cruise ship on Thursday. That's the word from the Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of National Security, Matthew Samuda. Mr. Samuda gave the update on a visit to the Falmouth Pier in Trelawney on Tuesday, hours after the cruise ship docked. Now, over 1,000 Jamaicans are aboard the ship. Many of them have been stranded at sea for close to 2 months. The Jamaicans will disembark the ship in groups of 200 before they go into quarantine.
The JDF team from PICA, the team from Port Authority, the team from Ministry of Health are just fine-tuning arrangements so that we're able to bring our Jamaicans off of the ship, get them tested, get them into quarantine, and then get them home very quickly to ease the strain and anxiety that we know they've been facing. We've had some challenges, there are no two ways about it, but we are, however, very focused on getting all of our Jamaicans at home. We understand the weight of the plight that they're facing abroad. We want to get everyone home, but we want to get everyone home safely. Safely for Jamaicans already at home and safely for them and their families. So we are working around the clock to resolve any issues that would exist.
In the meantime, the Royal Caribbean cruise ship Adventures of the Sea will be declared a quarantine area during the 2 weeks in which it will be docked at the port of Falmouth. Prime Minister Andrew Holness made the disclosure as he welcomed the Jamaicans who were stranded at sea for weeks. Mr. Holness said the medical officer of health for Trelawney will board the vessel and make the declaration ahead of the passengers being allowed off on Thursday. He also told the passengers that during their absence, changes were made to contain the spread of COVID-19 in Jamaica. He urged them to comply with the directives to protect the nation from a second outbreak of the disease. Now, as we mentioned, the passengers will start disembarking the ship on Thursday in batches of 200, after which samples will be taken for testing. They will then be taken to the Grand Bahia Principe in Runaway Bay, St. Anne, to await the result, which should be available 3 days after. Those who test negative will be allowed to go home for a mandatory 14 days quarantine under strict monitoring procedures, including a video check-in at various times during the day and a tracking by their smartphones. Passengers who test positive for COVID-19 will be taken to a government facility for isolation. The parliamentary opposition is questioning the decision to establish a COVID-19 field hospital at the National Arena due to uncertainty surrounding its use. Opposition Member of Parliament Noel Arscott raised the issue in Parliament on Tuesday.
At the National Arena, and that expenditure there, after we have overcome the COVID cycle, what plans are there for that facility? Or would it be better to have put an investment at some place where later on it could be utilized as part of our health program?
So, Mr. Speaker.
The 72-bed field hospital is expected to cost $182 million. Health Minister Dr. Christopher Tufton admits the government does not know the extent of the challenges, but it was better to be prepared.
Can't say with certainty that if we establish this field hospital, we're going to use it to its maximum capacity. The issue is whether you want to err on the side of caution and prepare and maybe not use it the way it could be used, or not prepare and then be in a situation where you have persons waiting on the outside of A&Es and not be having a bed to get service. It's a difficult decision and it can be interpreted either way, but we are thinking in a way that puts us in a position to best be able to respond.
Dr. Tufton says in the long term, the equipment at the field hospital could be used in other health facilities. Now, last month, another member of the People's National Party called for the government to establish a field hospital at the National Arena. Former PNP candidate for St. Catherine East Central, Dr. Winston Delahaye, suggested that the government used the army to expedite the establishment of the facility at the National Arena. And we now take a break on the midday news, but please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Continuing the news now. Anti-corruption watchdog National Integrity Action (NIA) is calling for the strengthening of legislation to improve the operations of investigative agencies to battle corruption. Speaking on TVJ's Smile Jamaica this morning, NIA's Executive Director Trevor Monroe outlined 2 methods he believes could aid in the fight against corruption in Jamaica.
The Manchester Parish Council fraud case has pushed several concerns to the forefront. One such concern is the whistleblower law, known formally as the Protective Disclosure Act, that would provide sanctions for persons believed to be involved in fraud. Professor Monroe wants it to be reinforced.
That Protective Disclosure Act, whistleblower legislation, can be strengthened in a number of ways. One of them is to ensure that whistleblowers who come forward are guaranteed automatic admission to the witness protection program where they're desired, and secondly, where there's provide an incentive for them, as happens in so many other countries, some kind of a cash incentive to come forward and say what you know.
He said another measure that could be used to help nab perpetrators in fraud is the Unexplained Wealth Order. This is widely used in countries like the UK, and Professor Monroe believes it could be also used. This is widely used in countries like the UK, and Professor Monroe believes it could also work in Jamaica.
If we had that, the Financial Investigation Division or MOCA could apply to the court to get an unexplained wealth order. And that individual, perhaps owning many apartment complexes without any clear explanation as to where that funding comes from, has to answer the question, explain where your wealth comes from, and if the explanation is not satisfactory, then of course charges could be laid.
While he's pleased with the Major Organized Crime and Anti-Corruption Agency MOCA for securing the 5 convictions in the Manchester Municipal Corporation fraud case, Professor Monroe believes it's time to revisit the Petrojam case.
In relation to that outstanding matter, where hundreds of millions of dollars were discovered by the Auditor General being lost at Petrojam across successive administrations, not just this one, but going back. That investigation report was completed in July of last year. We're now in May. We haven't heard a word from the Director of Corruption Prosecutions at the Integrity Commission as to what's happening there. That's something that we need to insist to get an update. Are prosecutions pending? If they are not, why not?
The 2018 audit of Petrojam revealed a free-for-all at the oil refinery. The audit detailed how hundreds of millions of dollars were paid out for contracts that were awarded in breach of procurement rules and the company's internal policies. Prince Moore, TVJ News.
The Minister of Health is moving ahead with plans to have specific guidelines instituted for the island's nursing homes amidst the rise in asymptomatic cases of COVID-19 in the country. The matter was raised at a special select committee looking at the response to COVID-19 locally. Here's O'Shane Masters with that report.
With elderly persons more susceptible to the effects of COVID-19, there's a heightened fear of them catching the virus. That led to the government issuing a stay-at-home order for persons 65 years and older. Restrictions were also put in place to protect wards of estate and infirmaries. But with Jamaica now having an increase in asymptomatic cases, there's another cause for concern for those elderly persons in infirmaries. That question is, what if there's an outbreak of COVID-19 in one of these facilities? Director of the Standards and Regulation Division in the Health Ministry, Cynthia Lewis Graham, says it could be troubling as some local nursing homes are not in a position to handle an outbreak of the virus. She says the finding is based on an inspection of 100 nursing homes.
There could be a risk as it relates to a COVID outbreak of an infection developing and spreading in those homes based on what would be considered crowding. And then that would result in us having a difficulty in implementing social distancing. Then there's the possibility of improper handling of laundry. How is it that they handle what would have been considered medical laundry versus general laundry that has to be separated and handled differently? How is it that they handle medical waste and food preparation? Those are issues that could be a risk in terms of the spread. Then we also look at the risk as it relates to the overall infection prevention and control strategies and the measures that are in there that could be negatively impacted by resources, because some of our inspections have shown that some of the homes are within areas that have challenges with water, with piped water.
Mrs. Lewis Graham says to address these issues, a number of recommendations have been made, among them the identification of isolation areas in case of a possible case of COVID-19.
There is also situations where more than one homes are owned by one proprietor. At the end of the day, an agreement can be had where they look at bed space availability in the other locations and transfer some of the patients there, some of the inmates there and residents there, And then you have the situation where they could identify potential patients that could be discharged home for a period of time. So those are strategies that we are proposing to implement through the COVID outbreak period.
In relation to inspections for COVID-19 strategies, she revealed that 118 nursing homes have been inspected, with 85 being satisfactory and 33 unsatisfactory.
Some of them would have included those that are having the water shortage situations. And so we continue to work with these, and we'll be monitoring those that are unsatisfactory very closely, and to implement whatever other public health strategies that we have in place to help with these.
When you spoke of the issue of water and a couple of the institutions that are in areas that also have a water problem, I wasn't so sure if you had given them a mitigation plan for that.
Yes.
You did. Okay.
Just to say that with regard to the inspections that we carry out, there are certain aspects of the inspections that are actually the responsibility of the public health department. And so the public health department, having gone in and identified the issue with water and any other aspect of sanitation, etc., has provided mandate.
O'Shane Masters, TVJ News.
And here now is a preview of what's coming up in this evening's health report.
In the next edition of the health report, we'll look at COVID-19 and renal failure.
Well, we know that the necessary precautions should be taken, like wearing your mask, hand washing, and the whole sanitization part of things. The regular things that everybody else does, but we just know that we stay in as much as possible. We only have to go. We only go out when it is necessary and stuff like that. And so far, I haven't seen any of my colleagues or anybody in the unit with any problem of that nature as it relates to COVID-19. So we give thanks for that.
That's the health report this evening in Primetime News. And now for today's healthy living tip. Manage your blood pressure. Maintain a healthy weight. Eat a heart-healthy diet. Reduce salt intake. Drink enough water. Limit alcohol, and don't smoke.
And that's the Midday News. I'm Vashon Brown. Join us at 7 for Primetime News Package. On behalf of the news, sports and production teams, have a good afternoon.